get another?
Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're
Come on. My kids are starving.
Listener supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What are we doing live? That goes in eternity.
All right, let's get it going. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go! Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. It is 10 p.m. Thursday evening, and we are here live on Studio A. Yeah, you've waited all week for the most cutting-edge topics and guests, and now it is time to deliver. That's right, it's the Stephen D. Kelley Show with your host, Stephen D. Kelley.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the show. My name is Stephen D. Kelley. I'm your host. This is my show on behalf of Revolution Radio. I want to welcome everybody here tonight, especially if you are a new listener. I want to extend a very warm welcome and greetings to you. Our listenership goes up so much every show that I swear we must have 100,000 new listeners every show. So to all of you out there, welcome and thank you for being here. This is a very big show that we have tonight. I'm very excited to bring these people here. I have 4 guests, very special guests, each one of them a giant in his own right with me right now. Actually, one of them is in a war zone, and he is having some internet and power issues. He was connected earlier, but hopefully he will be able to join us very soon. I'm actually going to be, this is a 2-hour show, but I am going to run over into the next 2 hours, possibly 4 hours, so there's a very good chance I will be on this station here, this channel, for the next 6 hours. So if any of my guests are able to stick with me, hopefully they will. And like I said, it's going to be a very important show. Oh, Masha's listening. Greetings, Masha. You guys, how do we bring Masha in? Anyway, we are a listener-supported channel. Everything that we do depends on you, our listeners. None of our hosts or any of our production staff are getting paid. This is strictly a labor of love, and this is extremely important. The mission that we are doing, we have a very small budget for what we are doing, a 24-hour talk radio with 2 stations. We do need your support. If you can donate anything that you can afford, $5, $1, anything. There is no such thing as a small donation. It all helps and it all adds up, and we are very, very grateful for every tiny little bit of money that we get from you. And we have a button on our homepage at www.freedomslips.com, and that is how you find our site support button. We also have a Facebook page. It is also Freedom Slips. So if you can support that. We've been growing about 50, 60 people a week, and I'd like to see that increase and get us up there. I'd like to see that page get up to 30,000 people real soon. That would be very exciting. I'm not going to waste too much time because we have a lot of information to cover. I mean, our mission tonight is nothing less than trying to save the world from World War III and thermonuclear war. And the best thing that we can do here is to try to reach out to people who may be swayed by the mainstream media and who just don't know what to believe anymore. So that's our job, and the people that I have with me tonight, let me just tell you who they are. I have Danny Welch, who is a linguist and a peace advocate out of Boston. He's with me here tonight. I have Vladimir Suchan, a Czechoslovakian PhD political scientist. I have Scott Ricard, who is with us right now. He is also a former NSA intelligence analyst. Danny and Scott are both linguists, and I'm going to have to ask you guys what languages you speak. We also have another very important guest with us who is a journalist based out of Germany. He is a German citizen, and right now he is traveling and he is in a war zone. I told him that I would not say which war zone he is. You know how many war zones are going on out there, but anyway, he asked me not to say anything until he comes on. We'll let him say it, and that's mainly for his own safety because there are people out there that would like to harm him, and when he is outside of the country and in dangerous places like that, he is certainly very vulnerable, so we want to do everything we can to protect him. Tonight we will be discussing just about everything from the situation in Gaza to the situation into the Ukraine, and oh my gosh, people are calling me on Skype. No, I can't take calls, guys, I'm on the air. But there's just so much. So all these things tie in together, and obviously we'll be talking about the airliner that was downed over the Ukraine and the various nonsense that went around with that. It's going to be difficult for me to decide where to start. You know, like I said, I've got Danny, Vladimir, and Scott here, and hopefully Manuel will be joining us very soon. Oh, let's see, who shall I start with? Vladimir, I would like to start with you. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Hi, say hello to everybody out there.
Hello.
Okay, thank you. Now, I suppose we should start with the Ukraine because obviously this is the most critical situation going on right now with the war drums pounding and Obama and the EU doing everything they can to try to start World War III in order to basically salvage or save the dollar, the petrodollar, and the International Monetary Fund from becoming completely irrelevant. Where would you like to start, Vladimir? You want to start with the airplane? Do you want to start with the Maiden, the Hunta starting to fall apart? What do we talk about that? There's been some developments. You want to talk about that?
Start with the idea that certainly scares so many people, and some people are suspicious of it. Others feel that there might be indeed great dangers looming over the horizon. And what I have in mind indeed is what you mentioned, the specter of a huge, big confrontation, whether it might be called provisionally World War III or World War IV. There is a little bit of academic or political discussion over the proper numbering, if this should be more number 4 or number 3. It seems that most people do tend to come on the side that the Cold War should be counted as a quasi-World War III, and therefore now what we have is a continuation of sorts of the Cold War, and the Cold War can be seen as a continuation of sorts of World War I and World War II, the large conflicts originating in the West over one singular question: who is going to rule the world? And the interesting thing is that I think for the purposes of this so-called worldwide global conflict, which for a while also went under the name of the Global War on Terror, is that this conflict might be a continuation, maybe by other means or maybe not so, of the other previous big conflicts. But at any rate, in the 1990s, I think specifically for this type of global confrontation and conflict, strategists developed the concept of the so-called fourth generation warfare, which is more or less, in my view, like a euphemism or code word for World War IV, which could be fought, and so far mainly has been, through hybrid warfare, warfare through proxies, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, jihadists, regional conflicts, managed chaos, low-intensity warfare, counterinsurgency, and the conflict in Ukraine is the latest addition and a major addition to a string of conflicts that have been destabilizing a huge area starting from Afghanistan, moving through Central Asia, the Middle East, going to North Africa, and if some of those post-Cold War conflicts started, for example, in Europe, in the former Yugoslavia, now Ukraine is bringing back the sources of confrontation, instability, and danger toward peace, as if back to Europe, to Ukraine, which is both part of Central Europe and also part of Eastern Europe. But right now, we have large-scale, serious military actions, battles going on 400 miles, maybe 450 miles southwest of Moscow. So it is like as if there would have been a huge, significant violence in Ohio. And evidently, if something like that happened, God forbid, that's clear how serious it would have been in the perspective of the people living in New York or Washington. And I think I'll just add to it that just today, Sergei Glaziev, a Moscow expert on Ukraine and advisor to President Putin, put up his new take on Ukraine, his article, which follows his yesterday's interview for Anna News, where indeed he tried to tackle or address the question that the threat is real, is serious, and that we are so far moving down a slippery slope. Certainly more can be said about it, but I don't want to take time from what other people might say on it, but I would at this point just say that what is happening in Ukraine is very dangerous. It is serious. Fascists are in power. They are armed, loaded. That's what the coup d'etat or the regime change in February allowed them to. Overnight, they were able to seize control over the armed forces and the police of a 44 million nation in Central Europe. And their program is a program of violent confrontation with Russia.
All right, Vladimir, thank you for that. Danny, it sounds like you got a little bit of crazy noise going on there, but that's okay. You can do whatever you want there. For you guys listening, be advised that Danny runs a small school, and they're having a sleepover at the school, so all the kids are out in the yard making s'mores or something like that, and he's trying to find a quiet corner. So if you start hearing children screaming in the background, you'll know what's going on. I guess I'm going to go next to you next, Danny. First of all, before I turn you loose, I just want to bring up a couple things. One is it seems that the junta is falling apart. The prime minister basically quit today, and we're seeing so many of their troops, the cannon fodder, basically being slaughtered or turning sides. The other issue that I thought that was really striking was that a Kiev magazine basically published an article and had some graphic that basically showed Israeli soldiers, and said that there was a lot that they could learn from the IDF. And I thought that was, how ironic is that, where you've got real live Nazis taking lessons from the Israeli military. What do you think of that?
I saw that piece. I saw that was an amazing shot of the. Yeah, well, I mean, people have been saying that about the Israeli military for years, if not decades, and they actually have gone around the world training, all of the most repressive police, departments and commando units, and so they're not far off. That is a real a real kind of service that they offer, and not to mention the ideological cover, But I wanted to mention, you said something about the wheels falling off the cart here, which is interesting. I think Yatsenyuk's resignation today and the dissolution of the coalition is significant, but I would caution against overweening optimism that it means that it's the beginning of the end, because remember, this is not a democratic project in any way, shape, or form. They're not looking. I mean, Poroshenko himself comes into power with no party base on purpose at all in the Verkhovna Rada. And so the idea that the coalition has fallen apart could also be just kind of an advanced billing of streamlining their consolidation of power on the part of the junta, which now doesn't even have to be an elected compilation of parties. It can just be whoever has the guns, basically. They outlawed the Communist Party yesterday. They outlawed the Party of Regions. They're going to have now maybe advanced parliamentary elections in, once you outlaw all the opposition, I guess you're good to go, But I mean, that's only one part of it. Other parts of it are very serious, like the defections you mentioned. There are reports from villages in western Ukraine that are basically depopulated during the day. Like the men are all hiding in the woods, which it reminds me of stories my wife told of growing up in a war zone. Kids hiding in the attic or in the basement during the day, and then coming back home at night. This is the third wave of mobilization, so to speak. So they're not doing well in any way, but they have, they like Vladimir said, they overnight they gain control of the state apparatus and all the armed forces. They're not going to get an endless supply of cannon fodder. There is something like, depending on whose numbers you believe, like 7,000 casualties on the side of the junta already. Like the losses are staggering, but of course they way outnumber their opponents in the rebels camp, and it's a kind of an attrition thing. This is not a long-term prospect. You can't keep this kind of a war going forever. They were hoping. Remember when in his inauguration, and he said, "Hours, not days, or days, not weeks." This is 2 months.
Where have we heard that before, huh?
Yeah, right. It is what I think is interesting, that not just about Ukraine, but I said this earlier. I've been meaning to write this piece called what is it? A full spectrum arrogance, right? It is the empire firing on all cylinders at once, desperately trying to forestall the inevitable. And you see this massive assault in Gaza. You see ISIS in Syria and Iraq at the same time. Just destroyed Libya. Ukraine is on fire. I mean, it's not a Cold War right now. The United States and its minions have basically set the world on fire. And it's kind of like an attack dog with his back against the wall. You have the BRICS summit and the establishment of this kind of proto-alternative IMF bank. You have some rumors. I don't know what to make. Some of this comes from InfoWars and other sources, but that one of the reasons for the NSA spying on Merkel and the German leadership was because the U.S. is petrified that they're going to dump the dollar and join BRICS. Now, that may be a little not far-fetched, but premature. But I think that this is basically the dance against which all of this is playing out. That's why there are all of these fireworks, because it's a scary time for the empire. It's losing its grip. And as much as I think that that's a good thing, in the long run, there's a lot of destruction that is going to plan to happen in the meantime. Like John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. So, you're going to be careful on how long this run is going to be.
Yeah, very good. We're still trying to get Manuel. He's actually with us, but his call keeps getting dropped, so hopefully we'll be able to get him in here really soon. But anyway, I'm going to move on to Scott here. Scott, oh my gosh, where do I go? Okay, there was a lot of information. I want to talk about the flight MH17 and this desperate, pathetic effort to try to pin this on Putin and the new satellite imagery that apparently shows a missile being fired and things like that. I know, Vladimir, that's actually your forte, but I want to give Scott a chance to respond to that. Could you talk to us about that a little bit?
Oh, most definitely. That's this has been one of probably the most pushed propaganda pieces by the Western media since the Syrian chemical gas fiasco that they tried to lie to us about. It's really
only 8 months ago.
Yeah, which is there's hundreds between those two, sadly. But what we really need to talk about is Ukraine's air defense inventory, their control of that inventory, their expertise in that inventory. When you talk about these surface-to-air missile batteries that are being allegedly had shot this particular aircraft down, there is massive amounts of experience in the Ukraine military. They've been selling these into former Soviet bloc countries as well as into other countries around the world, and training those countries for over 15 to 20 years. This is the system is much more than 20 to 30 years old, and these are probably they have a very significant inventory of these types of surface-to-air missiles in their possession. In fact, they actually shot down a commercial airline out of Crimea about 15, 20 years ago by accident. Actually 10 years ago by accident. The Ukraine government actually shot down a commercial airline by accident. So, to totally put them out of the picture, I'm not saying they did it. I'm just saying that there are a lot of players involved here that could have caused this problem. And it could have also been from an air-to-air missile as well. There's been some talk about Su-25 being in pursuit of that particular aircraft. So there's no shortage of potential suspects, but to have a clear-cut story based upon some tweets, some obscure tweets on Twitter, and then some video footage that could have come from anywhere, but was actually provided by the quote-unquote Ukraine intelligence service, which, my God, that's got to be probably one of the most unreliable intelligence services on the planet, and getting worse every day. So this is where we've based our foreign policy on, as tweets and intelligence coming out of a highly unreliable government that's at war with its own people. So that's kind of the sort of in a nutshell where I'm extremely suspect analysis by some people that I did have some respect for. I've had quite a go with Anthony Schaefer, who is perhaps maybe a limited hangout, because he certainly does do a good job at towing the company line on Fox News. But he did at one point blow the whistle on the Able Danger project at the Defense Intelligence Agency some time ago. And so, there is some kind of respect that I have for the guy, but I have very little respect for his analysis on this one. He's made quite a jump in analysis and judgment on this one. So I see it as obviously a tragedy, but I see it as a strategic move potentially by the Ukraine and American involvement to create a false flag. They are the only ones who had a motive. Now, it could also have been an accident. And as an accident, a lot of the times people are willing to take responsibility for accidents. So that probably is not the case with this one.
Hey,
so,
can I say something real quick, Scott? Based on what we know about 9/11, what we know about MH370 or whatever it was, the previous one, we know that every single one of these Boeings is fly-by-wire, and that at any time NORAD can take over the controls and fly them into the ground anytime they want. So, considering that, we don't need Su fighter jets or Buk missiles to take them down, right?
Yeah, but the way that the cargo and the bodies were spread, this absolutely blew up in the sky. I mean, it's pretty obvious to even the novice at this. There was just too much debris spread too far for it to have hit the ground and blown up.
Well, yeah, but remember, Scott, here in America, we've got people that think a plane did the same thing and crashed into the Pentagon, or another one crashed into a field in Pennsylvania and left a tiny crater barely 10 feet in diameter. So, right?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of issues with 9/11. I'll give you that. There's obviously some of the worst I guess evidence I've seen when you start talking about things like the 9/11 report and you get into the just the Zelikow nature of analysis. I mean, there was a lot of cover up involved in that quote unquote investigation. And a lot of people belong at the end of a noose, in my opinion, based upon not only the investigation but the people who perpetrated that crime.
The acts of treason, right? There's plenty of hanging that needs to take place.
Plenty.
Vladimir, I want to talk about Putin a little bit. And do you feel that the public perception has changed? I know a lot of people were really a little anxious for him to get involved and do something and protect the people over there in the East, but it seems to me that the so-called Russian insurgents or anti-fascists, as we would rather call them, seem to be doing a pretty good job right now. So would you say that Putin's strategy is starting to pay off right now?
I think it's too early to say. What I think is obvious is that Strelkov and his men's retreat from Slavyansk saved the anti-fascist resistance in the last second from a looming defeat. So they just escaped from the jaws of defeat in the very last possible moment when Slavyansk was already blockaded and encircled, and Strelkov had to fight his way through one of the checkpoint where the Ukrainian army had armored vehicles and tanks. But that was July 4th, July 5th, on the eve of that retreat from Slavyansk and fall of Slavyansk. The Kiev regime succeeded in taking over some of the adjacent towns that effectively cut off access or retreat routes for Strelkov, and also in this way supplies, logistic supplies, etc., which he was not really getting that much anyway at that point. Once Strelkov and his men were able to get to Donetsk, they discovered that Donetsk, while Slavyansk was defending itself for 2 months against huge odds, the militia in Donetsk
did relatively very little in terms of increasing defensibility of the city and organizing itself. Much of any serious work establishing defenses, raising the capability of the anti-fascist forces started to be done in earnest only once Strelkov reached Donetsk. And then right within a week of Strelkov's, the commander-in-chief of the anti-fascist resistance, the anti-fascist resistance was able to turn the table, at least at one portion of the front lines in the south, and encircled several Ukrainian brigades along the border with Russia, which is south of Donetsk and south of Lugansk. Because over the course of the last almost 2 months, part of the strategy of the Kiev regime was to try to cut off the two People's Republics from having any access or any connection with Russia. Therefore, people would not be able to move stuff, possibly weapons, etc. And they almost achieved this end by the end of June, and if I can tell, maybe only relatively a small segment of the border between Ukraine and Russia remained under the control of the Lugansk People's Republic. And virtually all the border between the Donetsk People's Republic and Russia has been taken over by the Ukrainian troops. And just a week after Strelkov reached Donetsk, which happened on July the 5th, the anti-fascist resistance was able to cut off some of the Ukrainian troops that became exposed in the south and started their enveloping maneuver. And the downing of MH17 seems to have at least one of its objectives to help lift the encirclement of what at one point might have been up to 7,000 Ukrainian troops. Because it seems that the original plan was that the plane would crash either on the border with Russia, but at any rate on the territory that is controlled by the Ukrainian troops or controlled by the troops of Kiev that are trapped in the encirclement. And in order to secure the crash site and under international pressure, the Ukrainian troops or maybe international troops, we know that the Dutch want to send their soldiers supposedly to protect and secure the site. If they could have done so, it would effectively mean that they would lift the blockade, the encirclement of the several thousands of their troops in the south. It seems, however, that the plan didn't work as it was supposed to, because once the right engine of the plane was hit, apparently with an air-to-air missile, the plane, instead of continuing on its course toward Russia, made a U-turn and started going in the opposite direction, which was not supposed to happen. And according to the information coming from Russian sources, at that point, the planners of the special operation or false flag operation panicked and ordered a Buk missile battery to shoot down the plane for good. So, and that's what apparently happened. And so as a result, we have the strange situation that the plane already reached the town of Snezhnoye, which is the last town controlled by the Donetsk People's Republic, and the crash site is 20 kilometers north, as if going back toward Kiev or backing on its course. And interestingly enough, our Western corporate media were very reluctant to give us precise information on the location of the crash site and on some of these details, which are absolutely crucial. Then the disintegration of the coalition, of the fascist coalition of the junta, today, I think in part might be also connected to the disintegration of the narrative and of the propaganda campaign or of the whole false flag operation with MH17. Because if this reading is correct, then I think they might be now soon be searching for a fall guy or a scapegoat on whom to put the blame for what happened. Originally, of course, they tried to pin the blame on Putin, and so we have seen the headlines that Putin's missile killed my children, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. Let me jump in there, Vladimir.
It seems that this case is now falling apart very quickly, and as this narrative and the false flag is falling apart, suddenly the coalition seems to be also falling apart.
Right, I want to reiterate.
There might be a connection there.
Something. Thank you. I want to reiterate real quick a very important point that you made, and this is interesting because this applies so often to these false flags. Is that you said that a jet probably shot a missile, took it down, took out one motor, it turned around, and then a missile was dispatched to finish it off and probably destroy the evidence of what happened. This is interesting because very often when we see these false flags, like for instance 9/11, of course the Twin Towers, Flight 800, multiple methods are used to destroy these things, and we as observers tend to argue over the method. Was it a jet? Was it a missile? Was it this? Was it that? A bomb? I've even heard people say there was a bomb on board, but this would be par for the course because often they do use multiple techniques or multiple methods, and this keeps us arguing. Danny, I want to go back to you. There was one other point I was trying to make, though, that people say, Putin's missile. Well, hello, all of the armaments that are being used in the Ukraine were probably manufactured in the former Soviet Union and in Russia. So obviously to say, it was a Russian missile. Of course it was a Russian missile. It's just like that saying that they were Putin's AK-47s that are being used to shoot these people. I mean, come on. So, really.
It's amazing how crude the propaganda, I think Scott had it nailed perfectly. This is one of the most outrageous propaganda offensives since the chemical false flag at Ghouta in the suburbs of Damascus last September. And it's the assumption of stupidity or I don't know, oblivion maybe on the part of the general public. It shows the contempt that the elites have for the people in any system. And what you see also is that this is kind of some sort of kabuki theater. You see these holograms acting out pre-recorded parts. If you just close your eyes and change accents a little bit, you're listening to Kerry and Obama and the Dutch representative to the UN or whatever. You might as well be listening to Churchill and Truman in 1953. I mean, these rabid, like frothing at the mouth, almost like angry children in a schoolyard. Maybe that's just one of my favorite analogies. But I mean, the screeching is it's almost dangerous. Like it feels unhinged to me, and like they'll take. Partly this is something that we're doing, that social media and alternative media is making more available now. When you have the BBC and all these people say, look at how disgusting it is, these like secondary or tertiary points where you're attacking not the facts, not the motive, not cui bono, but the emotional impact of this Russian, not Ukrainian because he can't be, right? Russian thug, separatist thug, holding up a trophy of what was it? The teddy bear.
The sock monkey.
Right. How awful that was, how disrespectful. And then, of course, all of us within minutes have access to the actual video in which he holds it up and then lays it down on the ground respectfully and makes the sign of the cross over it, right? Like, it's such a disingenuous and lousy and poorly done kind of thing. The same thing happened with the wedding ring, right? But this is the kind of the crudeness of the propaganda, I think, is indicative of two things which they contradict each other. One is this kind of descent into the law of the jungle, that what we say, we being the king of the hill, the indispensable nation, the exceptional nation, always is the truth. We don't need any facts. We don't need any investigation. It's all about emotion. It's all about controlling the narrative and ad hominimizing our opponents to, demonize them, call them atheists, separatists, terrorists, whatever. And the other part of that is how desperate it sounds, that maybe you don't have any facts on your side, like Saki and what's the new one there, Marie Harf.
Right. Yeah. The bimbos.
She's a piece of work too. This
they don't hire them because they're smart.
Huh?
Yeah.
They don't hire because they're smart.
They are smart in a sense. There is something, because it takes some sort of a trickster to keep, like, I'm rubber and you're glue. I know you are, but what am I? Again, maybe I go back to the schoolyard because it's an occupational hazard, but I'm shocked, and I think I feel guilty. Why should I be shocked? These people have been saying these same lies for 100 years, since 1917, really. And the other thing that comes into view for me, when you come about what did I think it was Vladimir, you said the question is who's going to run the world. This is not about communism. It's not about ideology. If you go back to all of those things that were said about the Soviets in the late 40s and early 50s and turning on allies immediately after the war, which Oliver Stone has done a good job of laying out for lay historians. But you see this same demonization. It has nothing to do with different systems of organizing a political economy. Nothing. It's just they're the enemy and they won't submit and we have to run the world. That's all it's about. It's just who's going to be the biggest dog. And so it kind of gives the lie to this crap argument of, civilizational choice and the Red Menace or the Iron Curtain or whatever you can call it today, because all it is to suit today's holograms, today's arguments in an ancient line of argument that's always been to demonize the opponent and take over the world.
All right, I want to bring up something that I think is a common denominator in every single one of these issues, and that is the Rothschild family and the banking cabal. It seems to me, when we look at what's going on, is that it's not the USA, it's not the IMF, it's not these Western, the EU that are dying. It's actually the Rothschilds empire that's dying. Scott, would you agree?
Well, I wouldn't say that their empire is dying, but the participants in their empire, the willing participants,
the minions.
Their minions are, they're eating their own young. They have quite a few industries that have fallen by the wayside. A lot of the, look at the, Corzine. This guy is a kingpin of New Jersey. He's even in New Jersey is the headquarters outside of New York for it's where the retirees from the Red Mafia go to New Jersey and Florida. So, these guys are falling by the wayside, and it's like, hey, what about me? Why do I have to suffer, when you guys are still getting your multi-million-dollar bonuses? So, no, it's not the Rothschilds that are failing. It's their minions, the guys that are at the, the middle to the end of the food chain in a highly corrupt banking system that, once again, is only 250 years old. And to add to what Danny was saying, because he's totally on point, in the 1950s, the Americans made a huge mistake and they really had an opportunity to come alongside the Russians and push away the British, and they didn't do it, because the British have been very effective at manipulating the government since the mid to late 1800s. Yeah, they almost did. It got very close. There was a point that I completely agree, but unfortunately, Truman, who was elected by the Red Mafia out of Missouri as a senator, and was brought in like a puppet, very similar to Poroshenko,
right?
Very similar to Gorbachev. This guy's, when the Zionist mafia, the Red Mafia, brings in leaders, they're very significantly successful at manipulating those. I mean, you don't have to go back too far when they were breaking up the Soviet states. The original revolution in Georgia, the Rose Revolution. If anybody knows anything about Saakashvili, Saakashvili is, by the way, he was very involved in the Maidan instance, and Saakashvili, he's an asshole. I mean, this guy. Excuse me, I apologize. This guy as a young child, he became basically a parliamentary person after being trained in Kiev. By the way, he went to school in Kiev. And then after he went to school in Kiev, he also moved on to the United States and got his law degree, went back, and within a year became part of Parliament. Now, that doesn't happen by accident in Georgia. You had guys like Graham Fuller who were manipulating the entire political structure of Azerbaijan, and Graham Fuller is a legend in the CIA. And this guy was put in place. He was made very soon after he was a parliamentary individual. He was made the Department of Justice. He was the Minister of Justice. So he was like the Eric Holder of Georgia. Now, this kid was only 29 years old. What did he know about justice? All he was he was a puppet. And then as soon as they threw out the late and great, I would say, Shevardnadze, Edward Shevardnadze was a fantastic Soviet leader. He basically was the president of Georgia here at the young ages of, and it's very similar to the replacement and also Yatsenyuk, but his replacement. I mean, his replacement, Vladimir, I'm not sure I can.
Groisman?
Yeah, Groisman. Yeah,
Groisman.
This guy is another one. I mean, here he is, another young kid, was a mayor of a town. But by the way, the town where he was a mayor is very interesting. You have to take into, because I don't know if any of you have heard of Vinnytsia, but it's the Soviets used to train spies in Vinnytsia because of its close proximity to the border, and it was very easy for them to move spies in and out of there, and that's the town where we've got the new supposedly prime minister for this immensely corrupt country that has been extremely set up by the neoliberal, neocon, whatever you want to call it,
Neophilia.
Neophilia West that has just architected the same thing they did in Georgia, and it's basically an exact duplicate of getting these young 30-year-old kids to go, and then somehow, I don't know, Poroshenko is obviously part of this oligarch Zionist mafia that is extremely prevalent, by the way. Let's not forget that the Zionist movement started in Odessa, and the Ukrainians paid dearly for not getting involved in the overthrow of the czars. And, a la the Holodomor that was basically murdered over 6 or 7 million through starvation in only a year. So,
Scott, we should probably also mention that Georgia was basically part of the Khazarian Empire at one time also.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Georgia, it was also, there's just so many ties back into this, Khazar basic empire that became Zionism, that was Bolshevism prior to that. And so, the real understanding that people need to understand is that these are a political movement of individuals that were very anti-Russian, that aligned very closely with the British, and have been aligned very closely with the British and the French and the Americans, even the Germans at one point or another, and now that whole NATO sort of alignment has been, throwing out, just as Danny was saying, throwing out just horrific propaganda to mind control the Western people to think that the Russians are bad. I'm not saying that I'm not pro-Russian or anti-Russian. I just know how much crap was thrown on my plate as a child and growing up, and now even today with the really sophomoric propaganda around what's been going on in Ukraine and elsewhere. With the Soviet Union is turned out, actually tried to keep the West honest, because the West has been so incredibly dishonest with their massive control of media. I mean, their control of media, to think of the Soviets as a threat, I mean, it's a David and Goliath issue. The Soviets have a much smaller army. They have a much smaller financial capability. They've been crushed 3 times in the last century financially, and come back, by the way. And this is this is definitely an underdog scenario whereby the Soviets have been painted into a corner several times, and they have acted with great honor by not going at the same route that the Palestinians have had to go, in the same route that the other nations that have been completely overrun and conquered had to go, because this is a country that is self-sufficient and has made its way several times throughout history, and bounced back from horrific Western Polish and Swedish and British incursions over the last few centuries, or 5 or 6 centuries. So I'm in a different camp. I'm not sympathetic to any nation. I'm just taking a factual look at history, and the numbers do not add up for the West. But unfortunately, people are raised with a very limited amount of knowledge and a very large amount of emotion.
Thank you. I'm glad that you brought up Groisman, and I'd like to talk a little bit more. And Vladimir, I'd like you to address these issues. But that particular character, it brings up a reoccurring issue here, and that is that the leader, or the new seemingly appointed leader of these real live Nazis, if you will, is another Jewish person that apparently has ties to the IDF. Is that something that you can address for us, Vladimir?
I'm not sure at this point. These developments are new, but clearly it was known that special forces from Israel were present at the Maidan during the demonstrations that were going on in downtown Kiev. Some of them even talked about it on videos, interestingly enough, and boasting how they were helping the demonstrators to learn proper tactics against the Berkut police and how to organize themselves better. So clearly there has been some good help or assistance already going on in direction of Kiev and these neo-Nazi forces. At the same time, just recently, now with the invasion of Gaza, what was also interesting was to see that the Kiev regime really is thinking of the Russians or ethnic Russians as an equivalent of their Palestinians, as if the Russians were the Palestinians, or soon to be turned into what the Palestinians are in the Middle East with respect to Israel. And the Kiev junta is clearly thinking of itself as being almost like a European or Eastern Slavic version of Israel in many respects, and they try to present themselves in this way to the West. They try to sell themselves in this way to score good points and to win some sympathies and support by positioning themselves as being on the right side of the struggle over the issue of the Palestinians. And the other thing is that it is well known that probably yes, there was this lovable show, Pinky and the Brain, yes, which probably we a little bit older ones, and although I was born in communist Czechoslovakia, but when I came to the United States, I fell in love with that show. But why I'm talking about it? Igor Kolomeyski, the main financier behind this Nazi junta, he seems to me, or he strikes me like being the brain behind all these Nazis. Because he's clearly very smart, very cunning, incredibly connected. He must have learned his politics either through some tough...
Okay, Vladimir, sorry to interrupt you, but we're going into a break. We'll be right back in 5 minutes, you guys. So we'll get back to you, Vladimir, when we come back. Everybody, please mute your microphone, and all you listening, please stick around. It's just going to be going on for a lot longer.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message. The finder of lost children and missing persons. Suchan. Surveillance, civil and criminal investigations. I investigate.
You know, I am the chosen one.
Do not underestimate the power of good, and do not dismiss the strength of the child.
Yes, every Wednesday evening on Revolution Radio, come join our very own Eye Investigatrix, Monique Lassan, with her private Eye X-Files.
So you're the finder of lost children?
Private Eye X-Files, every Wednesday from 10 to midnight Eastern, Studio B, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
I realize it's very hard for you to take in. But it's your destiny to find the golden child.
Listen in to Journeys with JP, Tuesdays on Revolution Radio at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. With a variety of guests, each giving their unique perspective on their journey through to the now. Journeys offers you, the listener, a chance to share that perspective. Join me, JP, on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Revolution Radio, simulcast with Wolf Spirit Radio.
Every Tuesday evening on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, we present our goddess spiritual warrior, Kathy Bilski.
I command. I call to the architect of the universe's divine creators and ask for permission to quantum leap the world in all life forms on all planes and dimensions, seen and unseen, connected with planet Earth, to let us go beyond our known potential into the greatest unknown golden age the universes and worlds and all planets have ever experienced.
Kathy teaches the spiritual truth so that you may create a better life and be able to make positive changes for yourself and for the planet. She helps us remember that we are not powerless, but very creative spiritual beings having an Earth experience. Time to quantum leap into the age of divine enlightenment and let Kathy provide you with the tools of knowledge you need to awaken spiritually. That's the Quantum Leap Show. Let light unite every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern on Revolution Radio, Studio B.
enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows a screw.
The body's filled with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio! Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay, stop music. Stop. Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the second half of the Stephen D. Kelley Show. If you are just joining us, we're having a very good show. My guest tonight, I have Vladimir Suchan, Danny Welch, Scott Rickard, and hopefully Manuel Oskenreiter will be able to join us very soon. He's in a war zone, and this power and internet is very sketchy where he's at. If you have just joined us, I want to welcome you. If you're a new listener, I want to welcome you, and I'm very, very thankful that you're all here. I am compelled to remind everybody that we are listener-supported. We are 100% listener-supported. The reason why we are able to have the shows that we have and to say the things that we say and get away with it is because we have no corporations standing over us telling us what to do. And thankfully, our owner, station owner, Hawk, has given us this venue, and we do depend on your support. So any donations that you can squeeze out, and I know that I'm not allowed to say how many listeners there are, but I'm expecting tonight that we will be breaking a record. And if every one of you was to just give us a penny or whatever the smallest increment of money is where you live, we would never have to ask for money again. There's that many people out there listening, and our budget is only $1,900 a month, and we've only need about $400. We've got 9 days to get that. So if you guys can help us out, it would be very much appreciated. I want to remind everybody we have a very active chat room that if you are using the computer to listen to the show, you ought to think about going to the chat room and meet some of the very fun people that we have in there. We also have a Facebook page. I encourage you to join our Facebook page, our Freedom Slips Facebook page. I also have a Facebook page. My name, of course, is Stephen D. Kelley. If you'd like to email me, my email is law17gun. That's law17gun at AOL.com. When we took the break, we were talking to Vladimir, and Vladimir was talking about I believe when we left, he was talking about the new person that's taking over the prime minister duties over there in Ukraine. So, Vladimir, could you please continue with your thoughts, if you could?
Yeah, if there was ever a person who reminded me of that cartoon character, the Brain, to me, it is Ihor Kolomoisky, the second or third richest oligarch of Ukraine, who has been the main financier and, for me, one of the, if not the smartest thug behind this new fascist regime in Kiev. He mainly operates from Switzerland, but the Kiev regime appointed him as a governor of the Dnipropetrovsk region, which happens to be also the place from which the air controller was giving the last directions and orders to flight MH17 that was brought down south of Donetsk. And there are reports that the voice recorder and the recordings of the conversation between the Dnipropetrovsk air controller and the crew of MH17 are lost, and that the controller himself strangely or conveniently disappeared. So going back to that question and Kolomoisky, it seems to me, and perhaps Scott and then should I think probably chime in on this. It seems to me that there might be several games going on. One is, I think, already a discernible objective to create a situation of instability, chaos, mayhem, terror, and violence that would sooner or later expand into Russia or engulf Russia, and that Russia being the main objective for which Ukraine is to be just a pivot or a lever or a bridgehead. And at the same time, indeed, if there are such forces as Zionists, they might have their own battle plan or their own strategy, which might not be completely the same as what some people in Washington are thinking about. Then there are, of course, the leaders of the European Union, which is now acting more or less like a younger brother to the empire, but still doing more or less what is expected of them and what is required from them. And behind all these clouds that are gathering, there's, of course, now the rising giant of China that is taking its time and more or less is enjoying the benefit of a significant geopolitical respite or break that allows China to gather its power and its might, and is doing it very strategically and very carefully, while everyone else now is getting into a conflict zone or getting engulfed in violence and instability. Well, speaking of the brain, just maybe on a semi-whimsical note, if Kolomoisky is the brain, then someone might ask who might be Pinky. And at this moment, the best candidate for me might have been Yatsenuk, but Yatsenuk seems to be now retreating or maybe running away. Because right now still I think there is a time for those people who would like to jump the ship to do so, but we will see.
I was waiting to see who Pinky was.
Yeah,
all right.
Pinky in the brain. All right, you guys. Danny, you're next. We're definitely focused on what's going on in Ukraine, obviously, but I don't want to leave out Syria. We're talking about Gaza, we're talking about the Ukraine, but I think we need to talk about what's going on in Syria and Iran a little bit, especially with ISIS. I mean, there's, I know that as we were focused on Iran all week, we had, there was like 10 times as many people were being slaughtered in Iraq and in Syria. So, can we bring that into the picture a little bit? Can we address that?
Yeah, well, I think, toward the end of his segment, Vlad said about the rising giant of China. So I think that there's no question that all of these things are related, and this is being played out on a global stage, and that Ukraine, like Syria, like Iraq, like Iran, is just one more theater in this. Am I connected? I can't
Yes,
hear.
you are. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Is one more theater in this ongoing global conflict. And you're right that while this kind of like obfuscation or distraction is a major part of the information war. And if you look at what's happening, there have been hundreds of people killed in both those theaters in the time while we've been talking about MH17, for example. And even just in Ukraine, there are more civilians killed since the downing of the plane by the fascists, lobbing unguided missiles or shelling civilian areas, right? But I think that the significance of what's going on in Syria and Iraq is that it's part of the global chaos machine. The idea of the Plan B. It isn't always even a Plan B. That it would be interesting, or it would be good for the empire to topple Assad, but rendering Assad powerless to act as kind of the regional chair of the axis of resistance. It goes from Iran to Lebanese Hezbollah to what was Libya, what was Iraq, what was the SAA before this invasion, is an important part of pinning down all potential challengers. That's full spectrum dominance, to find any potential resistor, anyone who doesn't knuckle under, and just bomb the crap out of them, or get someone else to do it is the easiest thing, to work through proxies and to work through secondary sources to hide the money trail or obfuscate the origin of the funds. So they work through Qatar, they work through the Gulf monarchies, and one of the things that ties these together is what Vladimir was saying about creating chaos in Ukraine. They don't necessarily they like failed states. They want to have chaos as kind of a driving force that will, either in Iraq or Afghanistan or Libya or Syria and in Ukraine, they have no interest in stability. Unless, of course, it's on their own turf, and then they want everything to be sewn up so that everyone bows to the petrodollar and lets all their currency be secondary, et cetera, et cetera. But on the turf of potential opponents, chaos is just as welcome as taking it over and controlling it from the top down. So in that sense, it's almost it's not puts us at a disadvantage because they have two very good plans. One is to take over and run it the way they want, or to just prevent us from having any, authority. So Vladimir sowing chaos and terror. It's a huge advantage to them, and that is being played out in spades in Iraq and Syria. Look at this ISIS thing. They just shift. You know what? I think we could use them. They're doing a great job in Syria. But you know what? Let's move into Iraq, and they can destabilize the government there because Maliki isn't really bowing down lately. He's kind of helping Syria too much. He's not, So we can just shift this menace. It's really scary to see it play out.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you, so much is coming out right now out of there. I mean, the destruction of the ancient relics and the holy sites, as well as the elimination of the Christians. I mean, obviously, we're seeing an ethnic cleansing here. The Ukraine and Gaza, of course, seem to be very similar with their ethnic cleansing. But I want to bring up one thing, and Scott, this is going to be for you. I'm curious whether you think this is just propaganda or if you think this is something really serious. But the latest edict to come out of the clerics over there is that all of the women between the ages of 12 and 49 are going to have their clitorises cut off. You want to respond to that?
Great, I get the clitoris question.
All right.
Well, I've been relegated. All right, so if I get to talk about that, then I also get to talk about this molestation and this horrible thing that they've been doing to men in the United States with the clipping of the men's penises.
We don't want to.
So I'm pretty pissed off about that.
Mutilation.
Genital mutilation has been going on, unfortunately, in the United States under the guise of these religious knuckleheads that we live among too. So let's not blow this out of proportion. There's knuckleheads in every country around the world, and let's remember that this ISIS, well, I'll call it, bandidos. These are a very small group of people. They're 10,000 people. And that's overestimating. They've been between 5 and 10,000 troops. So this is a small band of individuals, heavily armed, heavily protected by the Kurdish regional government, very friendly with the West, very friendly with the Kurdish regional government, which means very friendly with CIA, MI6, Mossad, you name it. These are a group of individuals that have been paid very well to fight against Assad for, now going on more than 3 years. This is not something that was a surprise to anyone. They were warned many times. There's many people in the intelligence community that were sending out many warnings that these guys are getting very strong. They can go in and take over any areas. And they were welcomed, actually, into some of the Kurdish areas. As well as, not really feared, but people realized, you know what, I'm not going to risk my life to protect this puppet government that has been put in place in Benghazi. So I see it all as as more of a media blitz to create the next Al-Qaeda. They've got their boogeyman now, and now they can claim that anything that happens now is not Al-Qaeda anymore. It's their new ISIS enemy. And I don't see it. I see a force that's about the size of Hezbollah. Look how much they've built up Hezbollah, just a small militia in Lebanon, and given these guys such credence on the global scale. So I don't see anything different here other than huge propaganda trying to vilify a bunch of banditos that have been heavily armed and have a lot of good friends that have been supplying the weapons and have been taking care of them when they cross borders into Turkey and into Iraq and into Jordan. This is not something that is very convincing to me. What's more convincing to me is Assad has been highly successful at battling these guys. He has had great support from China and Russia, thankfully. If they had done the no-fly zone and gone along with the UN Security Council, we'd see yet again another Libya there, and there'd be they'd be trying to turn it into South Sudan, giving it the ports that they need in order to ship the oil out of Iraq. They would go through Israel, by the way, but there's no room left on the shore. There's no places to bring in major oil tankers and set up a whole infrastructure there. And the land is very expensive. The land would be very cheap in Syria. So that's what we're up against. We're up against guys who are manipulating, gas and oil industries that have total control of finances, and these bandito groups of thousands of individuals that it's very clear to me that these are Sun Tzu was very articulate when he said that basically you can take these soldiers as kind of your children, is what he used to say, and they'd follow you into the deepest valleys, and as long as you looked upon them as your sons, they would stand by you until death. And that's what these kids are doing. These kids see their providers. They see their providers of their religious initiatives as they don't care. They're going to do this till death. And they're being led by Qatar, they're being led by Saudi Arabia, and they're working on behalf of NATO and their criminal warfare partners. So, no, there's nothing that you see about ISIS is real. Just remember that. Anytime you see these guys, just put up your red flag and say, "Here comes some more crap down the propaganda pipeline."
So you think that story about the genital mutilation was just to enrage us and make us?
You got it. Yeah, they know that's a touching point. Oh, they're going to cut women's genitals, but go ahead and cut the men's.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sick and tired of hearing that. I'm tired of this women genital cutting thing.
Hey, well, we're not
going
to
left and right every day.
We'll take a poll and see who's been cut and who's not. But
cut as a bait.
I am against removing the bell, so to speak. But listen, thank you, Scott, for taking the crappy question. I'm sorry about that. We still love you, but you're still the man. Listen, we do have. I'm sorry. Okay, hang on just a second. I got Hijacker with us who promises that he's going to be brief, and he has a question for Vladimir. Hijacker, go ahead.
Yeah, great show, Stephen. How's my audio?
Good. Go ahead.
Okay, Vladimir, since we know pretty much we can take a look at the game board of this one world order, the only bulwark that's left standing in the way of a one world order does seem to be Russia, and basically the armed American patriots. But on the question of Russia and Ukraine, it looks to me that sooner or later, I don't know if you were able to catch what they call Putin's brain, the economic advisor, 20-minute panel, very smart guy, Russian guy. He's Putin's economic advisor. But he laid out the case that the longer this goes, that time is not on Russia's side, and that if Russia does have to move into the Ukraine, they're going to have to do it sooner rather than later because of the buildup of NATO and the forces. So this is my question to you. Knowing Ukraine and knowing Russia and its capability, if the Russians have to go in, would all they have to do basically is take Kiev? If they took Kiev, would the rest of the Ukraine people rally and try to take Kiev back? Or could the Russians just go, take Kiev, lock these people up as far as war criminals, and then basically turn it over to the UN? Go ahead. I'll take my answer off the air. Thanks, Stephen.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I think you were referring to the same guy, to the same advisor I mentioned earlier, Sergei Glaziev, who indeed made that important speech, I believe it was in May, where he indeed looked as a smart economist, because I think his background is in economics, at the war plans and strategies of the Kiev regime and compared their mobilization rates with the existing potential or existing forces on the part of the anti-fascist resistance. And what he saw is, for him, a very dangerous picture, because the Kiev regime started a series of partial mobilizations in early March. And Ukraine is, after all, a 44 million nation, minus perhaps 2 million people who live in Crimea. And the Kiev regime is controlling the apparatus of the state thanks to the coup. And what Sergei Glaziev was saying was that in early March, the Ukrainian army, as a fighting organization, didn't really exist. Some Ukrainian officers were assisting the United States in Iraq. They had some experience with peacekeeping, but because of the oligarchs plundered whatever they could, overall the army was really in a bad shape, underfinanced, disorganized, with low morale. And so had Russia did something bold, as what was done in Crimea, and that's my opinion, the current war might have been prevented. But for a host of reasons, the West bluffing, creating a danger of a World War III, hysteria, offering some compromise and deal which looked perhaps too good to be turned down, that window passed. And what we have now is that the Ukrainian army that was really good, not for much, in March and perhaps still in April, today is already an army that is capable of launching large-scale operations, and it is a serious force. And it has been, and the mobilizations have been going on, and as a result of that, the numbers of people that actually can do effective combat is doubling more or less every month or so. And so Sergei Glaziev was saying that in March, April, the combat-ready troops in the Ukrainian army might have been around 10,000-15,000 troops. By the end of June or so, that number reached already around 50,000-60,000 troops. This number can double by September, and then, in his view, if the mobilization rates continue at a given pace, the Kiev regime, the fascists, can field 500,000 army by the end of this year.
Well, I thought they were having trouble getting. I've been hearing stories about the men were going into the forest hiding from conscription.
No. What is now also happening? The latest news that I received today is that the Kiev regime is now basically catching people on the streets and forcibly mobilizing them for the troops. And there are reports about this from Mariupol that was seized by the Kiev regime, I think a month ago or so, and it is going on elsewhere. As soon as the Kiev or Ukrainian troops entered Slavyansk and some of the other towns which they seized in Donbass, they immediately tried to do the same, forcibly mobilizing, recruiting all the available males in these towns into the Ukrainian army. And so that's what they are doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Going back to the question of, can you please remind me what was the second part of the question about Putin, or the going on Kiev. Right now, and that was, I think, one of the reasons why Putin and the Russian government was reluctant to introduce its own troops in Ukraine. The fact is that because of the very effective anti-Russian propaganda and nationalism, fascist-like nationalism in Ukraine, a significant number of Ukrainians are highly anti-Russian and very nationalistic. And so what we see in Donbass is not exactly the same sentiment that exists elsewhere, and Kiev is not overall a pro-Russian city. And the Russian government is perfectly aware of that. So that's, I think, why right now any dash to Kiev is, in my view, not exactly in the cards. Rather, I see this war becoming more protracted and might last much longer. 2 months ago or so, there were some hopes, wishes, expectations that the Ukrainian army could turn against the Kiev regime. I think at this point we passed that window, or it might have been possible, because the Kiev regime did establish or impose its control over the armed forces by buying out people, intimidating others, firing others, intimidating others, putting other people into prisons, etc. So I don't think right now that any revolt or coup within the coup is a likely possibility. Other people expected their hope that the economic and social hardship would undermine the regime. However, knowing other conflicts, how long they last when the economy is in tatters, and how often terror and intimidation can exert its power over a large number of people, I think that even with economic and social hardship, the Kiev regime still might be possible through its fascist thugs, paramilitaries, and by controlling the forces of the instruments of violence and terror, still outlast or still last for a significant time. So in this situation, if there is no new significant change or some strategic surprise, this conflict is going to be much longer than what we might wish for or than what many people expected it to be.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go to you, Danny, but I just want to bring up a couple points. This is a little bit of a departure, but it seems to me that there's a little similarity.
Not genital mutilation.
Yeah, no more genital mutilation. Sorry, Scott. But anyway, I see a lot of analogies between Gaza and the situation in the east of Ukraine with the losses that are being experienced by the Kiev regime versus the losses being experienced by the IDF. Obviously, the losses of the Kiev regime are quite more substantial, and their troops have quite a bit less experience. But it seems to be the same. Their nose has been bloodied. They're wondering, when is the EU going to bring them in? When are they going to start getting euros and this kind of thing? It seems to me their morale is going away, and I got to tell you, I mean, I'm of the opinion, well, two opinions. First of all, I don't, to answer Hijacker's question, I don't see Russia ever trying to go into the Ukraine. I think for Russia, it's a waiting game, and they, time is on their side. But I don't know, Danny.
Yeah, well,
with what I threw at you, could you respond?
Yeah, I would. I mean, that goes a little bit back to what Vladimir was talking about and what the questioner was saying. I took Glazev's analysis then with the same grain of salt I take it with now. I think it was a fairly strictly kind of academic and mathematical calculus, which is a little bit, I felt, insufficiently sensitive to the political rather than mathematical question. The fact is, it's true that, impressment in the United States Civil War kept the conflict going for a long period of time. You don't always have to have a mobilized population, a generally war-ready population, in order to field a large fighting force. But, of course, then that affects the quality of the force, and then you can't just talk in mathematical terms about sheer numbers, because you have increasing desertions, you have lack of morale, lack of willingness to fight, and why, it's like Scott said on the sidebar, why they're getting their asses kicked, that sort of thing. The other thing is that the doubling time analogy makes it as if it's like bandwidth or computing time. And I don't think it's a linear, I don't think it can project out like that. And I think to whatever, I agree with everything Vladimir said about the potential, the sellout in Donetsk, and how Strelkov was supposed to die a hero and breaking out of Slavyansk saved the resistance. But I also think that the Russians were making this political calculus, which relates directly to what the hijacker was asking. Can Russia go in, and how far and when and to what extent? And the brainwashing of an entire population means that mobilization is inversely proportional to the resistance you're getting from the perceived enemy. In other words, the longer you let the oligarchs send your children to die, and you have crying mothers, even if they're not complaining about the war, they're complaining about their kids being rotated too infrequently and not having good enough body armor. Well, that's how it started in Vietnam, and that's how disaffection builds. It doesn't have to be direct political disaffection. It can be a cannon fodder war that grinds on, and that doesn't do well for anyone. And look at this. This is the third mobilization. It is true. When you're snatching people off of streets, maybe you're in control of the state apparatus. Maybe you have a base of 44 million, but listen to what that is. You're grabbing people off the streets and forcing them at gunpoint to go kill other people or be killed themselves. I don't think, in my kind of just common sense calculus, I don't think time is on the side of that type of mobilization. The only thing that could change it is an enormous upsurge in politicization and mobilization of the general population, which comes from a direct Russian involvement. And so I think that has been also key to Russia's calculus in this regard. They can't be seen as being too involved, or people will not gain disaffection with the Kiev regime, which is inevitable. I think of course it's true about the what Vladimir was saying about the economy. Yes, that can drag on for years, but it still does militate in one direction and not in the other. It's not forever. It may be almost forever. Again, in the long run, we're all dead, right? But
okay. Thank you, Danny. I noticed that it looks like Scott dropped off, so I'm gonna open up. Sean, if there's anybody out there that wants to call in, we're down to about less than 20 minutes left in the show. So if anybody wants to call in quickly with some questions for our guests, please do. Now is the chance. The call-in number is 347-688-2902, or you can Skype in at Freedom Screen. One word, Freedom, SCREEN. Oh, Scott's back. Okay, Scott. Hey, what? How long have you been gone, Scott? Where were you?
I caught most of what Danny was saying until I rolled my chair into my CPU and took out my system. So I'm coming back up to
that whole time you were gone, Scott. I was taking a very difficult question on Well, we won't go back there.
Yes, let's not. That's going to be your topic next time, buddy.
I'm going to have to do a whole show on that, huh?
I'm busy whatever night you're having.
Yeah, I'm going to be busy.
Yeah, you guys. Yeah, I'll go to an interview with RT or Press TV that night. Sorry, guys. No, I'm really disappointed that Manuel didn't get in here because I've been dying to ask him about the rumor that Germany is going to be joining BRICS here, and I guess France now is also getting ready to join BRICS, and I think this has a lot to do with this big $1 billion judgment that the United States placed against them for selling that troop transport vessel to Russia. You guys, Scott, can you respond to that?
Well, I can respond to the troop transport ship for sure, but the rumors about France joining, I think, are I'm hopeful, but I highly doubt it. They're so in bed with the current IMF. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Paris Club, but every single month the oligarchs meet in Paris to discuss how they're going to manipulate third world banking environments. So, to think that the French would bow out of their positions with the banking of international settlements and the IMF is just unheard of, in my opinion. Now, Germany obviously would have a better reason to do it. They're the glue that's holding the EU together. And certainly it would be the death of the EU if they did. I'm not certain that certainly under Merkel they won't do it. Merkel's an extreme puppet for the IMF. But potentially the German people want it. The German people are a lot smarter than Merkel. She's in that position for a reason. Same reason that we have Obama and Bush and those kind of guys. They'll do what they're told. They're good little McCain type people. Very, very well trained. Pavlov's dog. You know exactly what you're going to get from these guys. So I'm not in the same camp. With that type of thought with France at all. I mean, France has constantly been in bed with the.
Hey guys, it looks like we lost the server. Oh, it's Rack. Sorry, well, Scott. Could you repeat that for? How long were we gone there, Scott or Sean? Just a moment.
I heard it.
Okay, yeah, I just noticed the server was bubbling, so it looked like we were down for just a moment. All right, but anyway, basically you feel that there's no way France is going to leave the IMF, and Germany, of course, is the heart of the EU. But at the same time, you notice that the EU is trying to make friendly with the BRICS representatives now, as if they could coexist. Is that a farce or what?
Well, it's an absolute farce. BRICS is made up of probably the most, persecuted financial systems on the planet. You know what Brazil, Russia, India, not as much India, but certainly China, and now South America. You know, South America used to be. You know, let's go back a little bit in history prior to the fall of apartheid. South America used to be the kingpin nation for the West's manipulation and laundering of.
Uh-oh. You there, Scott? You just dropped. Yep, darn it. Gosh, guys, I swear, Skype is being really mean to us tonight. And you guys listening, I got to tell you, I think we're being attacked. Sean, I believe that we're being attacked because I just checked the numbers and they're nowhere near what they should be. So something's going on. They're definitely fighting us tonight. The powers that be are being disruptive. Hijacker, you just joined us again. You have a question? Can you get it out there quickly, please?
Yeah, Stephen, you got a really great high-powered intellectual panel. And before we do get cut off, if you could hold the server going into open roundtables, because Danny, Vladimir, Scott, these are really rich, deep resource people that have an understanding of the way things work. And I would just like to go a little bit with them if you hold the server into roundtable.
Well, hijacker Keith AZ is going to pick up the server immediately afterwards, and I have forwarded these guys' contacts to him. And so anybody that Vladimir, Danny, Scott, if you come back, and Manuel hopefully will join us. Obviously, I'd like you to stick around if you can, if you don't mind staying up a little bit later. Because I will be on for at least another 2 hours and possibly 4 hours. So if anybody's up for that, I'm definitely anxious to continue this.
Yeah, especially Vladimir, because he's got a good regional understanding of it. But also Danny, he's a gunslinger. He's very, very smart, very clear thinker, very smart. So yeah, I just want to put that out there before we do get cut off.
All right. Thank you for that.
This is what I'm saying, Vladimir, is that time is not on the Russian side. You said yourself that as the Ukraine builds, and supposedly, I didn't know it was going to be a 500,000 army by the end of the year. I thought it was supposed to be something like 100,000 by September or something. But you probably know better than I do. But what I'm saying is that Russia cannot have it. They're eventually going to be forced to fight with the Ukraine. It's not a battle that they can pick. The one worlders can cut their gas lines anytime they want. They can force the Russians to fight. When they do, if the Russians can fight a conventional war, the West, we've got superiority both in economics and in weapons. I mean, for Pete's sake, 210-story towers just turned into nothing. What does that? So eventually, if Russia has to fight, they'll have to go conventional at first, but then in the end, the Russians, in order to survive, and Putin's capable of this, he's going to have to break out at least the micro nukes. And then we know where that goes. So my argument is, Vladimir, why can't the Russians do an asymmetrical, unconventional war and take his army, 2,000 tanks, Kiev's only 200 miles inside of Ukraine from the Russian border, roll right into Kiev, not even try to take the city, just plant his tanks all over the place. I don't think the Ukrainian people will rally and try to take the city back, and then he just basically locks it up, and then Putin says, UN, send in your peacekeepers. The Russian army wants to go home. I mean, what's wrong with that strategy, Vladimir?
Many people felt that way, and try to make a very similar, if not the same argument for the last 3 months, especially with a view to the situation in which the Kiev regime found itself right after the unconstitutional coup. It didn't have the legitimacy, it didn't still have sufficient control over the state, over the armed forces. Loyalties, allegiances were still fluid, vague, not established. And there was, I would personally think, a certain window of opportunity to make a bold action, preventive action, and to change the situation through, in a way that might have put a stop to the escalating, spreading violence that we see now. Following on your question, I would like to add a few other factors to our previous discussion and to what Denny said. In April and May, most of the soldiers in the Ukrainian army, like many of the rebels in Donbass, didn't want to shoot at each other. They didn't want to kill each other, and they were very reluctant to do so. And the Kiev regime was well aware of that, and also so were U.S. advisors to the Kiev regime. And it was even noted by the New York Times. However, by the end of May, at least on the part of the Ukrainian army, this psychological block was overcome and breached. How was it done? through various measures. The right sector or the National Guard were executing soldiers who refused to go to a battle and to shoot others. More intimidation and terror. Violence started to happen, and as one of the Ukrainian army officers that was captured by the rebels, the famous female officer from the Ukrainian army who spent some time in Iraq, she said that at that point when she was captured, which I think was in late June, that what would happen is that people start shooting at each other, people start dying or being wounded, and that builds anger and frustration. Exactly. And so that becomes then its own, it becomes its own self-fulfilling or self-perpetuating machine and mechanism, and that's what happened. Also, many other psychological management techniques were deployed, etc. So there was one thing that happened. The psychological reluctance or barrier standing in between these two sides and ordinary people who really didn't hate each other has receded in many ways.
Vladimir, but this is my point. My point, it's a little bit about the psychology of it, but yes. When I take a look at the Ukraine, it is a one city-state nation. If all Russia doesn't need to take all of the Ukraine, they don't need to bomb everywhere, have lines and counter lines. If they were just to take and they leaflet the Kiev and they say, look, in 48 hours, the Russian army's coming here with 50,000 guys and 2,000 tanks. We're going to lock your war criminals up, or you got 48 hours to send them in cages to The Hague, but we're coming. Get the women and the children out. We're coming. We're going to get your war criminals. Once we got them, we're going to haul them back to Russia. You guys reset your elections, fix your economy. We're not going to stay. We'll turn it over to the UN. But we're coming in 48 hours. And then, boom, a day later, cut the power to Kiev. And that's ball game. No Ukrainian conscripted guy, when he knows that he's got the Russian army that's going to make a beeline for Kiev, he's not going to stick around. The ones in the countryside around Kiev, they're not going to say, oh, I'm going to take Kiev back. They're not going to mobilize all over the place.
All right, Hijacker, I got to jump in here because the show's almost over, and we really don't have time for that right now. But I got to tell you that Putin's not an idiot. That's not going to happen. It's nowhere in the cards. Okay, Russia is not going to go in there. That is exactly what NATO wants. That's exactly what the United States wants. Remember, we're the dying monster, not him. In fact, I'll tell you, just watch. China's going to start using liquefied petroleum gas to power all their cars pretty soon. I mean, China and Russia, they're set for the future. We're screwed. They've got it made. You know, they don't need the Ukraine. Ukraine needs them. Scott, Hijacker, the show's over. Hijacker, I gotta cut you off. Okay, I gotta get back to these guys.
All right, when the pipelines are cut, Putin's got to go in.
The pipelines are cut. Okay, they don't care. Seriously, Scott. You were saying something before you were cut off and we lost you. Can we try to pick that up real quick before the show's over?
Sure. Not sure where I got cut off, but basically the gist of it was, you know, you're looking at a failed economic situation whereby it's being jacked up by these TARP and quantitative easing programs, and the facts remain that BRICS has paid off their debt. A lot of these guys have paid off their debt to the IMF and the Paris Club. I don't know if you caught me when I talked about the Oliver Stone movie. Was I still on then?
You did. We did cover that briefly, but I'm not sure if you went into that. But go ahead.
But in any case, the gist of that was Oliver Stone basically had, interviewed the president of Brazil, and the president of Brazil was talking about paying off these debts, and it was much like Gaddafi, where he had really gotten rid of all the debt in Africa. And the facts remain is that that's what the IMF and the Banking of International Settlements go after, is they go after countries that are challenging them, specifically in the oil and gas business, because it's one of the most lucrative. These are by far the largest businesses on the planet. The top 4 businesses on the planet are oil and gas companies. So that's their bread and butter. And any time you go after that, and I agree with you that Putin's not going to be that foolish to go into Ukraine. They already have plans, and they already have strategies to work around the pipelines there. So it's a situation whereby you have an agreement with these BRICS nations, where these guys have said, look, let's work together. Together we can work more effectively against the IMF, and like I said earlier, the EU sees it as an opportunity to look. If we can't beat them, we got to join them, and obviously they'll try to go in and co-opt the BRICS opportunities and destroy it from within.
Okay, Scott, I appreciate that. Listen, guys, we're down to the last few minutes, and obviously I don't want this to stop. And if I promise that I do not talk about genital mutilation, will you guys join me again, please? Danny, Scott, Vladimir, you guys, we have to do this again. And how many of you are able to stick around? Are any of you able to stick around for a little while longer?
I have to check in at least. With Julia and the kids momentarily. I don't know if I can come back, but
all right. Well, you do that, and if you can come back, the next producer is going to be Keith AZ, so be watching for him trying to bring you in. Vladimir, how about you? Do you feel like staying up late tonight?
Just for a while.
Okay, a while would be great. Scott, how about you? Do you have any time?
I'm good to go. I was supposed to go to the Veterans for Peace conference up in Asheville, North Carolina, and I missed it, so I'm here for this.
Excellent. All right, very good then. Okay, I want to thank everybody that's been listening tonight, and unfortunately I think the powers that be kind of shut us down because we should be having ridiculous numbers, and the numbers are very unrealistic for the power of what we've got going on here tonight. So I'm not going to let that discourage me. It just tells me we're doing something right, and they're doing everything they can to shut us down. That is it. Everybody, thank you in chat. Thank you all listeners. We'll be back again next week, and please stick around because I will be taking this further for the next 2 hours at least on Major Tom's show. So stick around. We'll be right back after this break.